plants and services here at Waters. We're not in the business of displaying plants, even though it's fun to walk through. We are in the business of selling plants. And if your yard looks really good, you want to be buying more plants. So we really measure ourselves on the success of your yard and how much you enjoy gardening. So that's kind of what promulgated the classes. So you can go online and look up classes. They're going to be recorded and preserved in YouTube. So if you want to start a rose garden, you've never grown a rose, then you can look up how to grow roses, watch a couple of classes, miss a bunch of the trial and error. I encourage you to try something that you've never tried before as far as growing a particular plant. You're really good at peonies, and so branch out and plant a coreopsis and see what happens to yourself and the plant. You'll just grow in the experience. Today's class is kind of threefold. One is stuff that can handle the heat, that loves heat. One is to plan so that you have something in bloom all the time. And I'm going to take that a little bit different and go with color all the time in your yard. And the other is stuff that you almost don't need to care for, which is kind of the bane question, the question we don't want to get. People walk in and say, well, I want that green plant. It blooms in the summer and I don't ever have to water it or do anything. And it's usually, well, you go to Michael's and you get the silk plant, and stick it in the corner and paint some flowers on it when you come up from Phoenix or something, pay to have it watered or whatever. So I want to start there. I had a house up off of Copper Basin. My front yard was what I called manicured forest. And what I would do is, as I walked around the woods or I saw some cool grasses on the side of the road, some neat flowers, you can watch for those, look them up, get the seed, go and take the seed, put those out. Those are plants that are indigenous to the area, but they're also going to come up and live on the cycle of our rainfall and everything else. They're not being cared for. That's something that's how I would approach that. When you come into a nursery and you say, oh, Opuntia or the prickly pear, that grows all over the place. I see it in the forest. I'm going to take that home and not ever water it. Well, that is the same species, but it has never been treated that way. That plant was cultivated from a cutting and put in perfect soil and loved until it looked good enough to bring here. So you can't just, manzanita, perfect example. Manzanita that's growing in the forest has been there a lot longer than we might want to think. And when we bring them in, they don't grow real well from cuttings. So the ones that are grown in pots are several years old by the time you get them, and they've been in perfect potting soil, and you're going to take them out and put them in your yard and never water them because the ones that were growing there naturally are really pretty. Well, it doesn't work that way. So just ask a lot of questions and be in tune to that. How to get something to grow or how to have color in your yard all the time. Well, another common thing that we want to do is, especially with the development that's going on, I lived here 5 years. I didn't see anybody. Now I have a neighbor. Please help me build a wall. Well, if you go monochromatic in that, then you're not going to get the color that you want. If you plant all red tip Fittonia, for example. So I would encourage you to mix that up a little bit, put some other color in there. Some of the euphorbias or privet, will get as big and give you the block, and they're evergreen. The disease won't jump. You've seen you drive past them now and you can see the red tip Fittonia's got a fungus on it, and every one of them has got it. Well, if you mix it up, you'll get a more attractive wall that the disease won't be able to just spread plant to plant as easily, because you want them touching because you want it solid. So that's important. In saying that, get a plan. Get a plan. Whether you pay for one, you can go landscape architect with growth rates that is in tune to your HOA. They should be if you pay for one. That's like $1,800, $2,500, $5,000. You'll get an actual plan. And whether or not you want to use them or not, but you will have that. You can draw it. Get somebody that's practicing. But then you're following that as you go through the year, and you can pull it out and refer to it. Look at it before you come shopping. Always try something different, knowing that you got a lot of sun or you don't have a lot of sun there. And that's important because it'll keep you sane your yard won't look like you just went crazy at the nursery and bought a bunch of stuff and stuck it in the ground. You'll have a plan. This is where my sidewalk's going to be, and whether it's here or not now, it works better for you, and you'll have more success with it. Plus, you can treat your irrigation and your soil amendments in zones like that. That's really helpful. Then you can look at winter, spring, summer, and fall and see what's blooming in those. And now there's a litany of lists on how to do that. But I would, rather than go through everything, I have some examples. Rather than go through everything, don't forget, when you think about flowers, don't forget about color in your shrubs. You can have forsythia, for example. During the year, that's just green. And in the winter, it's just sticks. Well, if you pick everything out that blooms all the time and you're only going to have sticks, that could be problematic. Both of these are going to be sticks. This is a smoke tree. This is a white blooming crepe myrtle. So if you did forsythia for the spring and these two for summer bloomers against your evergreens, you'll have some really great color. But again, you're going to have sticks. So you want to have stuff that's going to stay, mix in some ice blue cypress, Arizona cypress, or some dark green Hollywood juniper, so that these things set aside from it. It gives it a good background, and you can use that as something else. So monotheistic, yes. Monochromatic, no. These are, don't forget your herbs. On your ground covers, you want to have some evergreen stuff in there to offset your forsythia or your coreopsis. This is a perennial, loves the heat, but you want something evergreen sitting next to it. So when this goes to sticks, you've got some really pretty color here. This is lavender. The lavenders, just as a coincidence, are on sale. I've got 3 species, a couple of English and some French. Low, evergreen, perennial, real hardy. These are not on drip in my yard. They are, oh, I better water those sort of thing. I don't leave them completely alone. Big bluish purple spikes, just really, really, really pretty. Nothing really eats them either. If you're in that manicured forest look, or you're out in the prairie where you can't fence your front yard, they're too aromatic. Another really good evergreen ground cover is your oreganos. There's flatter ones, are the ones that I like. There's a spicy Italian. They grow really low. They can handle all the sun you can throw at them. They can take a little bit of shade. You can walk on it. It's evergreen. It'll bloom in the summertime, and you can eat it. So that's pretty fun. So, this is almost a weed being very durable, not something that you don't like, but primrose. Then I've got a pink one that's a Mexican primrose, but you can see where you can put this in your yard and keep some evergreen and have some color. These are summer bloomers. This is a taller summer bloomer in the hyssop family, your hummingbird mint. Big smell, really, really fun. Out of my front yard, I will have the coreopsis, butterfly bush, hummingbird mint, and another one of the purple sages. And this is the plant that the hummingbirds go to first. They'll fly around and then they stop and eat this nectar first. And there's purple in that and stuff like that. That's a really durable. These are all very durable plants that I'm going through with you. So to go back and get back to our outline on the heat. Heat, don't confuse heat with sun. All right. There's a lot of plants that really perform well in the shade when it's hot. And some of them are evergreen, some of them aren't. Hostas. This will get a really pretty spike on it. It's going to die back to the ground, but it's a shade lover. It's going to bloom when it's warm. It looks great, by the way, with something else, heuchera. There's multiple colors. Most of the color to this plant is going to be in the leaf. Mine at 5,700 feet last year kept some of the leaves, and then a couple of the dark green ones went completely to the ground, and then they just came roaring back. But dappled light, but they were really showing off in the heat of the summer. Our hottest month is supposed to be June. As we move into July, we get the clouds. So it's a little bit different than the rest of the state. This we used to affectionately call graveyard plant. It's the vinca minor. The vinca major behaves a little bit differently. It wants to climb a little bit more. It's got a bigger leaf. They bloom in the middle of the summer. They love the heat. They can handle some sun, some direct sun in the evening or some direct sun in the morning, but they prefer the shade. And but they like the heat. So don't confuse shade and or sun and flowers, because you can get flowers out of all of that in the shade, but they will flower when it's hot. This particular guy is one of my favorites. He's actually an evergreen. And he is so 2 feet of snow a couple of years ago, 2.5 feet, melted. He looked just like this, as soft as he is. And he's a euphorbia, which really means he bleeds milk. The milk's toxic. It's got a nasty taste to it. Most critters aren't going to come back and eat it. Rodents, squirrels, javelina walking past it every day. It's a 2 foot by 2 foot plant. Again, can handle some really good heat. It likes sunshine. So knee high, nice little ball, and has this flower that looks Avatar-esque. It's just a crazy thing. And it'll bloom, and you whack it off, and you can keep some evergreen in your yard in the sun that nobody's going to eat. What was that, ma'am? Rainbow ascot euphorbia. Another heat lover. It's not going to bloom until it's hot. So you'll get sticks, but your milkweed, sometimes called butterfly weed. But these guys will come roaring back. They die to the ground. A couple of years ago, when we had that really late freeze, I had them up about chest high, my sticks, I had them trimmed. They started to show, and then we got the cold. I cut it to the ground. I came in to work. I bought a new one. I didn't want to disturb that root ball, so I stuck a new one in the ground that was starting already. And the one that was in the ground passed it and bloomed. So I had 2 of them just, 4 foot, 5 foot tall, full of flowers, but not until the sunshine. Most of your daisies and your Gaillardia are going to be blooming in the summer. The Gaillardia I refer to as a golf course plant. There's probably 4 different colors to this. We got a solid tangerine this year. First year I've seen that. Really, really pretty. Critters don't eat it. The caveat or the disclaimer there is if it's really dry and there's nothing else to eat, they're going to pull these plants up and probably eat the roots. And they may not like the plant, but they'll pull it up and they'll eat the roots. Or right after you plant it, they smell the disturbed dirt and they think maybe there's some grubs there. Sometimes if you catch it soon enough, you can salvage the plant. It'll be halfway across the yard and you can put it back in the hole, but it's rare. These are fun for evergreens, for having something bloom, or at least having something bloom all year round. There's several in the sedum family that are, this one included, that are going to die to the ground. You're going to think you lost the plant. In the fall, late summer, he's going to put out these really pretty spikes of pink. Let's see, autumn joy, hence the name, right? It looks like the old kalanchoe. There's some that have purple leaves. There's some that have variegated leaves. Inside of this same sedum family are ground covers that will stay evergreen. Critters don't really care for them. You can't really say never eat them or always eat them because it just doesn't work in the plant world with all the critters that we have. Medicinal coneflower or echinacea, several different colors, heat lovers. They're not going to bloom until the fall. Same thing with your salvia gray guy or autumn sage. This is hot lips. I've got in stock right now, purple, dark red, white. The critters don't really care for it. It's very aromatic. They will taste it. This particular plant goes 3 foot by 3 foot consistent. It's just a really nice mound of color all summer long, but it's not going to start to bloom until it gets hot. So you think you'll have sticks. Rosemary is another one of the herbs that I really like to. They keep experimenting with this one's. There's actually one here called barbecue rosemary. Some of them are a little bit more pungent. When you're buying it, crush a leaf, get a smell for it. The verticals will go 3 and 4 foot tall. They're evergreen. They bloom in the summer. No critters really like them, and you can eat them. If you do the vertical, you'll get nice straight tines that cut off properly. You cut them with a sharp edge and clean them up so that they, I have to show you. Put that on the counter and let it fill up some smell in your kitchen for a couple of days, and then drop in some olive oil to cook with and just keep it there. Take this and give it a little sharp edge, use it as a skewer. The stick is not going to impart much flavor. It's just purely ornamental. Then you don't have to take it off and just lay it on the plate. But you'll get long ones off of a 4 foot plant, and it needs to be trimmed anyway. Your trailing rosemary will cover a really nice big space. It'll bloom again in the summer, and it's really tasty. The issue with rosemary is I wouldn't put it in with other herbs. It doesn't play well with other plants. It has a very aggressive root system. That's why it's so durable. It takes a bunch of nutrients and stuff like that from your other plants. There's something I wanted to point out about heat lovers that a lot of people are not familiar with. There's a difference. One of the differences between an agave and a yucca is the agaves take longer to bloom. When they bloom, typically the parent plant dies. That's your blue agaves, the one that grows wild out here that's a smaller, perfectly symmetrical plant that puts up the great big spike. That's a perennial, beautiful, beautiful plant. But the parent plant is going to die. It's going to send out runners, or it'll have actually pups on the stalk sometimes. So when it falls down, either it reseeds or those little babies will start to grow. But the yucca will bloom and bloom and bloom and bloom. Now it's not going to bloom until it's hot, and it can handle, this is a parking lot plant, and it's real durable. So you're going to have some evergreen in your yard and some color spikes during the hot months. But read your labels and make sure you're getting a yucca. Are you getting a yucca or are you getting an agave? Your barrels are really fun. This one is a fish hook. Now their bloom is going to be once a season, once the plant is mature enough, and they're all very unique. It's real easy to have 25 different types of barrels in your yard. Then these will bloom for reproduction. They'll set seed. They're not going to die after they bloom. They'll bloom every year once they get to a particular age. Your lantana, another huge heat lover. There's only 2 species. Oh, this is the caveat for your lantana. There's only 2 species that are going to overwinter here. We'll sell the other colors up here in the annual greenhouse. That's where you're sitting. But Marianne and Miss Huff are the 2 that are hybridized enough to handle your cold. They do go to sticks, and they will bloom in the summer, but they start to bloom when it's hot. Gara, another summer bloomer. 2 or 3 colors of this. There's actually 2 native species. One's a lower pink, and the other is a great big monster that grows in the creek beds that doesn't have much of a flower to it. But they're real durable. He'll get a little wilty when he needs a drink. I moved one when I bought this other house. It had absolutely no root. I did it because my wife wanted it, and I just played along. He looks like this in my front yard right now. He's just an amazing plant, real durable. Gara, Gaura. No. Now you're going to go out and plant a bunch of stuff, and then they're going to come by and they're going to taste it. And whether or not they like it is going to be determined not by how much damage they do when they taste it, but whether or not they come back. So just be careful about that. Yes. I'll do it. The sign-up sheet. There's a couple of things I wanted to. This is a ever requested javelina. Go to the website, get it one that's not wet. What the critters don't like. We keep a list. We don't always separate them on the table, but they are on the site. If you're not receiving emails from us, there is a pin. Give us your email address. You'll get some of the information about today's class, but also you'll get information like Ken's Weekly. If you're not always catching it on the radio, then it's nice to see the outlines and things like that. Apuntia. Correct. No.
Ken's column, you'll get other stuff like that. But we only send the handouts for this class to the people that attend this class or give you their email address on it. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, do that.
Apuntia, your prickly pear. Lots of different types. This one, you see the little red fuzzies? Don't let these rub up against you. Get a pair, if you like cactus, get some gauntlet gloves and just go in like owning bees. You just go in knowing you're going to get stung. So, but these are probably some of the worst because they're really hard to get out. The pads are edible. That's what caused this plant to go international. It's got a real high vitamin C, and the sailors would keep it on boats to keep their scurvy down. And but it was hybridized to not have, some of them don't have hardly any. But if you're going to eat it, you want to eat the fresh petals before you can see the veins. The veins are real tough, like rope almost. And so when you get them and they're still a little bit pliable, handle them with some barbecue tongs, run them over your fire, singe all the little needles off of them, and then just julienne it. And it's got a pretty good sugar content. Cut it up real fine and throw it in a pan, fry it hot. And you got a slippery pan, you don't need as much, but great inside of your tacos that you can buy them pickled at the Mexican markets. Really, really a good plant. But that one went around the planet because of all of the medicinal value to it. Sunburns, just like your aloes and stuff like that. Really, really a good plant. But also an evergreen. And this is one of the ones that a lot of them are grown in Phoenix and sold up here. And they're really not, the species can make it, but that particular plant can't make it. So be careful about that. But this is a great one for summer blooming in your yard. Don't forget your color when you're doing this year round. So you have some of the forsythia that's not in a bloomer, in one of these. It's considered a perennial, but it's a shrub. But you also have your crab apples, your red buds, your flowering pears, your flowering plums. All of those are going to lend themselves to this, let's move across the yard and always be blooming. So you've got some evergreen shrubs that you didn't go monochromatic on, and you have some trees in there that are going to bloom. You've got a couple of evergreens mixed in with all of that, you know, your cypresses and your junipers, things that we had talked about. And you're in front of it, you can put some of your butterfly bushes, for example. Great plant. I brought this one's kind of played out, but you got to see the bloom on this. Proven winners patented this. These are both pugsters. They are, most of the other growers across the country were trying to develop a short butterfly bush because they're notorious for getting 7 foot tall, right? They wanted to develop a little one that had a big flower and a big leaf. And Proven Winners is the one that was able to do that. It was patented. I don't know how long patents run on plants, but those are 2 foot by 2 foot big flowers. They're not quite totally deciduous. They leave some leaves on. That gives me an opportunity to talk about how to take care of some of that stuff, like these. When they go sticky or they've naked, as we say, I shape the sticks. I don't whack it all the way down, and I don't want it to look ratty. So after it loses its leaves in the fall, I will shape it a little bit. And then in the spring, I will let the plant tell me where it's going to come out. And I can decide how much I want to keep, but on the stalk that you think may be dead because it's crispy, you'll see little bitty nodes coming out, cut down right below the first node, or you can just trim down until you hit green, a little bit at a time. It's nothing. It really hurts my soul when I walk up to it with the long clippers and go whack, and I realize all those stalks are green and I lost a foot of growth, right? It does put on new growth, so you do want to be aggressive cutters. This is, how, ma'am? That's a great point. The question is, how often do you water in winter? We have taken the turn off your watering system, which is really for saving the watering system, saving your valves and your lines from busting, to the plants don't need water. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. I had mentioned phosphate earlier on. You want, phosphate is the center number on your fertilizers. You have 3 numbers. It is actually a root food. The side effect is flowers. So on all of your flowering fertilizers, you'll see a high center number. In the middle of the winter, you want to be feeding your plant phosphate. Give it a boost of phosphate in the fall or in the winter and feed it probably twice, maybe 3 times, water it twice, maybe 3 times in the winter. And that it's the only time that the roots have an opportunity. They're not supporting the rest of the plant, but they're regenerating. So when you have one of these, for example, a coreopsis, and you're just giddy that it made it through the winter because it shows a little bit of green, it should almost be a third larger coming into the spring, not just surviving. You want it to thrive. So you got to feed it some root food, and then you'll go back to your nitrogen, some other stuff in the spring. But you want to feed your sticks, feed and water your sticks. Some more heat lovers that will go naked. This chase tree's got some great history to it, this one here. And it was brought over by the Franciscan monks. This is, you see this down in the creek beds. You know, just, oh, wow, look at that blooming out in the middle of nowhere. Again, if you buy a plant that is grown in a greenhouse, if this is grown in 100% mulch, just because the one you saw out there in the field is growing and it's never been watered, doesn't mean you can buy this here and take it home and never water it. The species, yes, but not that particular plant. Chase tree, vitex, is to be chased. The monks were concerned about celibacy. The seeds from this are called monk's pepper. The leaves have a really cool enzyme in them. You ingest it enough, make tea and eat the pepper often enough, it dampens the male libido, so they say. So that's whether you want that at home or not, that's your call. But a little bit every now and then you can use for flavor. It's a really cool. I encourage you to grab a leaf and crush it. The seed go real easy when you first make your first stew and you're going to try in a soup or something like that. You could treat it like a bay leaf, throw it in there and fish it out. It's got a really, really neat flavor to it. It's used a lot down in the Yucatan to cook with. So let's see. The other thing was, again, I want to go back to whether or not you have to take care of that stuff. If you see things that are out in the field, some of that stuff got up here or along the side of the road. Some of it got up here because it's a mix in the seed for the erosion control. You see some really neat stuff in the median. Please don't go out in the median. You know, try and look it up and see what it is and order some seeds. We got a lot of seeds on the side of the wall. Come in here and buy them. Eden Brothers is a great source of seeds. I use them frequently. I'll buy, a pound of coreopsis and just throw the whole front yard if I'm not gonna have a lawn, and see what comes up. And some of it will get watered and some of it won't. And poppies are the same way. You can do a couple of poppies that you really don't need to care for, California poppy, you're going to get what you put into it. The plant will survive. The root may or may not act as a perennial for you. It will reseed when it blooms, but you'll get more if you water it. So whether you're going to water it or not is completely up to you. Yes, ma'am. Best time to put seeds out. So flowering seeds and grass seeds, most of the stuff that's indigenous to the area, you'll see some of the red top right now that's really pretty, the grass that's blowing, they want to go through winter. They will come up throughout the year. So I will gather seed, vacant lot, commercial guys throwing some stuff out or whatever you get, wherever you get it, order it online. And I'll put some out at different times to hedge my bet. The best time, the label, the Eden Brothers will tell you, but oftentimes they're not talking about we have a very unique little ecosystem up here. I'll put some out right before it's going to rain. I'm oftentimes out there in my slicker throwing seeds out while it's raining. But I will always put some out before it snows. So that cold is what causes to germinate sometimes. The lupine, for example, blue bonnets, whatever you want to call them, they have some of the seeds will last 5 years before they germinate. Manzanita won't germinate unless it's caught on fire. So it produces by laying down roots, or the seeds come up after you have a brush fire. That's why you see big stands of manzanita. They shoot up real fast, block all the light, and they're the only thing that can grow there for a while. Again, one that you want to take care of. This again, these hot pokers, there's popsicle, there's yellow, there's the color usually is reflected in the name, but the plant's essentially the same. These tubers are super durable. Daylilies need some care. These guys will just come up in the yard and you'll get more out of them if you water them, but they're pretty much carefree. This is called a red hot poker is the street name. This one is Nympholia popsicle, red hot. No, it dies to the ground. That one dies to the ground. So, and again, one of the more important things about getting color throughout the year in your yard is have a plan. Whether you draw it and agree on it with your spouse, your partner, make sure that you're working at the same speed. I'm going to take the perennials. The winter bloomers, which we haven't touched on yet, are really, really kind of particular up here. There's a camellia, which is the plant looks like a wax leaf ligustrum. Nice dark green leaf, really pretty, attractive plant. Great big flower, it looks just like the picture on the tag that's hanging on the plant, but it blooms when it's cold. We won't get them until they've got flowers on them, which will be late fall. But it is a shade lover, which is really kind of unusual to have such a really pretty flower and shade. And that's a really common question. What can I get to bloom in the shade? Camellia. It's a shrub, very woody, evergreen, wants shade, dappled light. Pyrrhus, Japanese mountain pyrrhus. That's an evergreen. It's a shade lover. It's nice and woody. It'll have these really pretty tallows of white flowers. The red, the flame pyrrhus will act like a red tip photonia. The new growth after it blooms, it'll bloom twice a year. The new growth comes out just scarlet red. It's a really, really a pretty plant. Does well in a great big container. If you want stuff to overwinter in your containers, make sure you plant it in good soil. Please don't fill the pot up with empty Coke cans or styrofoam or something like that. Go ahead and break down. You've got a $100 pot. Don't try and save $1 or $2 on not using enough potting soil. If you don't have enough soil in the pot, the roots get cold. You have to have a big enough pot so that ambient temperature doesn't translate into the roots. So a lot of the shade stuff ends up in big pots on the porch. So you got to have big clay pots full of dirt, not full of a bunch of other stuff. The annuals make great winter bloomers. And annuals are a really interesting spot in your yard. You want to be able to, oh, something's not blooming and I'm having guests over. You just come in and buy some annuals and stick them in the yard. You can trade them out 2 or 3 times a year. But your snapdragons, there's all kinds of plants that love the cold. Pansies. As soon as it gets warm, then they start to fade on you. The plant does. Again, going back to your feeding, if you buy a really pretty hanging basket and you take it home, and in a couple of weeks' time, you have a really pretty green hanging basket without any flowers on it, or very few. They're pushed. The term is pushed. They feed them a bunch of phosphate to get them to bloom, but you're rinsing it out every time you water it, and the plant is eating. So it's a double whammy. So after you buy something, know that it was on drip here with fertilizer. And when you take it home in about a week or two, it's going to need some more fertilizer. So again, don't skimp on well, I'm going to wait until it needs it. Well, now you're playing catch up. So stuff in the ground, feed it with some phosphate, some flowering food, feed your stuff in the winter, come in make sure in your plan you have a color spot that you're going to trade out plants periodically so that you will always have something in bloom. And don't forget your winter bloomers and your shrubs as part of your color. That crepe myrtle, for example, what a pretty color of flower on that purple leaf. That's one of the last things that come out. People bring it in their sticks thinking they killed it, and the plant's plenty alive. It's just one of the last things to come out, but you're going to have really pretty foliage until it starts to bloom, and then it'll bloom until it gets cold. Same thing with your smoke tree. Pretty, but it's just going to be sticks. So you want to make sure you've got some evergreens mixed in there. But as you pan across your yard, you should always have something in bloom for your hummingbirds and your butterflies. And this guy I just had to show off just for fun. We told the grower that it was about as ugly as it could get, and he knew it. So he sent it to us just for entertainment. But it's only a weed if you don't want it, right? So typically in my yard, I'll let it bloom before I kill it because I want to know whether or not I want it. But I happen to like stuff like this. It makes it really interesting. This is a perennial. It will bloom as soon as it starts to get hot. It'll bloom until it gets cold. It'll die almost back to the ground. Oh wow, it's got a square stalk, which puts it in the euonymus family. Really, really pretty plant. What is the name of that? Canary Island sage. And most of your sages, the critters don't like. So again, they're going to taste it to see. And so that's all about the damage they do when they taste it. Do we have questions? Something else I can help you with? Some other fun folklore about your plants?
Plants in winter with fertilizer.
Yes, the question is, how often do you water in the winter? And that is, and how often do I feed? What I use is our blooming food. But just because it's got a high phosphate. On my trees, I will use a granular phosphate, which is just called superphosphate, and I throw it down around the base of the tree and I water it in. Now I've turned off my sprinkler system. So my peach trees, I'm gonna put 10 or 15 gallons of water on. I will throw my phosphate on the ground first and dissolve that with the hose. Snow, 2.5, 3 feet of snow really only equates to a little bit of penetration. It's as wet of a winter as we had. If you go down into your soil, you will see that when you plant this, you have roots all the way down here. That's what you're trying to get to, not here. Watering in general should be less frequently and deeper so that you're not just keeping this wet. The correct answer is you have to be able to look at your soil and tell whether or not you need a deep watering. Typically, it's 2 really good waterings in the winter, but I use a piece of rebar. You can use the moisture meters, which we have, but that's good mostly for your potted plants and some of your shorter, maybe your perennials. I use a piece of rebar that's like 2 foot long that's got, I use the thinner one. When I've planted my plant, I've made a hole that's farther out, you know, it's wider. I'll run my rebar down in there until it hits the bottom of the hole. And I'll pull it out and you read it just like you're baking. There's going to be bone dry spots. There's going to be wet spots. You can tell from that whether or not you have standing water, which you don't want, soggy on the bottom, or it's wet on top and bone dry on the bottom. You got to get a deep watering in. So you'll get a feel for each plant. None of it's universal. You have to look at the plant itself. The phosphate is the key ingredient. The flower power that we've developed is 1248 on phosphate, and then I think 8 on potash. So I'm looking for that phosphate number, and I'll use that on shrubs in the spring. I used it on deodar cedar. Got yellow this fall, and they just didn't look very good. And I turned the water off because I knew they were standing in clay. I pulled out their stakes because they had been staked for 2 years. And I threw some phosphate in the stake holes and covered it up with good soil and slowly gave them some water. But I gave them our flower power for the 12 on the nitrogen, and it greened them up. Yes, ma'am. I would, the question is, we make and sell the 744, which is our all-purpose, and she does that quarterly. Yes, is the short answer. You do want some for the roots specifically. The 744 was designed to be organic and keep your microbial activity up. The acid, which is mandatory up here, comes from cottonseed casings that decompose over time and release acid into the soil. We have high pH in the water and the soil, and you want to be combating that. Plus your acids will help blow apart your clay if you happen to have clay. It's a molecular bond that gets blown apart with clay, with your acids. In the fall. Yep. It is. It'll be 0,18,0. It's called superphosphate. It's a granular. How he does that, I don't know. Yes, ma'am. This one? This is a desert willow. Yeah, again, this one has a really neat smell to it. I haven't tasted it, so I don't know if you want to put it in your soup or not. The particular species that we have found, or that is grown for us, has less seed and more flowers. There's a couple of them that are pretty messy. So they might make a really good gift for your neighbor because they're really pretty, but you don't want to clean up after them. So you can see them across the street or something. But they're real hardy bloomers, really neat smell when they get wet. This vitex or the chase tree, these don't get as big as they do in Phoenix because of our freeze back. Much like the crepe myrtles. Crepe myrtle in South Texas is a 20-foot tree. It's just not going to get there here. Well, it's it might be the crepe myrtle probably has 15 feet on it. I would say 10 or 15 feet's a good size one. This one in my yard is a friend of mine called and said, I have this enormous butterfly bush. It's taking up too much space. Will you come and get it? And I went and dug it up. It was 6 foot in the ground, cut it back. It's 4 foot right now. It looks just like that. I took all the dead stuff off. It killed about, a foot of it. After I trimmed it, it still killed some of it. The winter did. This is the same. You can take this. Oftentimes when you see them, they'll have multi-trunks. So you can isolate 1 or 2 trunks and just clean them up and force it into taller growth. Or you can just lop it off and make it thick as a bush. Don't overwater it. Your manzanitas, as I said, they're grown in a greenhouse and then brought out or in rows in a field. But if you put them on a drip, you'll probably drown it. Oh, that's a really good point too, because a lot of times we get these questions up here. What color of drip am I supposed to have? Well, don't go out and change them all today. But as you do, get a pocket of the little round ones. The head is round, they're black. And so if there wasn't forethought, they didn't know you were coming and that you were going to be this master gardener, horticulturalist, supreme. They didn't give you a bunch of different zones and you're having to play catch up on how much you put out. The little flags are very limiting, that's on or off. And it's 5 gallons, 3 gallons, whatever it says. The dials you can open up and you can start with 0 to 5. You can go 5 to 15 and you can put more and keep your system happy. But you can dump more on a tree and less on a shrub, but just by tweaking them. So I wouldn't go out and just trade them all out. The little ones get clogged faster. It's easier to do. So hope that was helpful. Anything else before I sign off? Ken, are we on time? Oh, I got a few minutes. This one? Oh yeah, this is it's not in the milkweed family. Valerian. And I get one of the questions I get on stuff like this, it likes to go dry. This is super dry. It is a tuber. It's a perennial. It will come back. When you buy it like this and you're living in Chino or Prescott Valley and you've got a lot of wind, it's really okay if they fold over. Because what will happen is it'll come back stronger. So don't buy it because the one that's in bloom from here isn't going to necessarily make it right now. Some of these will fold over. Some of them are a lot stronger than you think. They'll keep going. As you cut them off, their roots should become thicker. You should get more. You don't want the plant to just survive through the winter. You want a plant to be bigger than the one you planted. This is it. 2 foot, 18 inches. Yes, it is. I don't know that. So you got to go, you're going to have to go online. And you just have to be careful about where you're looking things up. We don't have all the right answers, but we're from here. And a lot of times somebody will come in and say, well, I'm treating this plant this way. And you can tell the plant is from Oregon and the information they're getting is from a grower in Washington. And it's just not the same. And that's very important when you're looking at sun or not, because the sun is very different coastal. Something that is full sun in Washington or California is not full sun up here. You are 4,000 feet closer to the sun, but you don't have all the humidity that reflects or refracts the radiation. So you just get pure unadulterated sunshine up here. And some of that stuff that's labeled as full sun, you're going to want it in partial shade. Don't forget your herbs when you do your plan. Do a plan. You can. We do have a program for that, where you can bring your drawing in, and it's really free. This it is a plug, but it's something you should make yourself aware of. You buy yourself a $250 gift card, and then someone in an apron takes off their mic and you get undivided attention. And so you just bring it in and say, hey, and you walk around and you pick out stuff. You're going to spend the money on yourself. It's not like it goes to the person that is helping you. So that's a really neat thing to look at. And then when you are doing your forensics on your soil, make sure you're not going too perfect in your hole. The more mulch you add, the more care you're going to need. You only want to change the molecular structure of the soil so that the roots are comfortable going through it. If you fill that hole full of mulch thinking it's going to be, oh, you don't like this crummy dirt and you want to make it perfect for them, you're going to get air pockets in there. You're going to chase problems. It's going to hold moisture when you don't want it to. It's going to be a mess. So 1/3 mulch to 2/3 native soil. The other thing that's really important, say you've planted some of these really beautiful specimens 3 or 4 years, they start to look a little puny and you're not treating them any differently. Well, this is 100% mulch. What you planted, this is 100% mulch. And so as it, over time, and it's not immediate, it's 3 to 5 years, trees especially, this breaks down as it is designed to. It's supposed to break down to make your soil better. Well, you end up with air pockets around your roots. And so get a bag of the topsoil, which is sand with, it's meant to level off, your lawn. Well, the sand will fall into your air pockets. It's got a little bit of mulch. It's the dustier part of the mulch with your sand. So maybe when you're going to do your annual phosphate feeding, throw that down, crack a bag of topsoil around it, water it in, and you'll see the sand almost completely disappear. That means that diagnosis was accurate. You're giving your roots a little bit of that blanket. The sand is filling in your air pockets. You're going to have a healthier spring because of it. Aspen are notorious for that, because we buy a pot, with 3 aspen in it. You got a 25-gallon pot. It's 100% mulch. Over a few years, they're stressing out. Don't forget the difference between a yucca and an agave when you're picking them out. Agaves bloom when you buy them in a store or in a nursery. Typically, they all come from the same grower if you're buying the same species. Well, that works in your favor. Oh, they're all going to die at the same time. Yeah, but they're all going to bloom at the same time. So if you've never seen a desert full moon outlined with a row of blooming agaves, that's stunning, especially if it's in your yard. And you can plant it because they're all going to bloom at the same time. So, but you'll get a bunch of pups out of it. And this is just one of the smaller ones. Queen Victoria is what this one's called. Really, really pretty specimen. It's not going to get a whole lot bigger than this, but you'll get a mound of them next to a sidewalk. Spikes aren't supposed to go close to the front door, so maybe next to the driveway. No, it makes a good container plant, but again, and it doesn't have a real deep root system, but if you put it in a shallow bowl, then the roots are going to get cold. So you just want a big enough pot, clay preferably. Your plastic just doesn't insulate very well. Something else about your clay pots, which is very helpful. You can put this, if you wanted to put it in a pot, put it in a bigger plastic pot so that it has room for its roots to grow, and drop that inside of your clay. Then you've got the airspace between the cold, which is good insulation, and the roots. So the roots aren't up against 15 degrees. That's a really good insulator. If you want to keep stuff in pots and you have some really pretty, they're yard art, you're spending $300-500 on a really big, beautiful pot. Don't forget the dwarf fruit trees. Stunning springtime. 5 foot tall, 7 foot maybe, full-size trees. The difference between a dwarf and a miniature, the miniature is going to have smaller fruit. The dwarf is just a smaller tree, but it's going to have great big standard-sized pieces of fruit on it. Great big boom of pink or red in the spring on your porch. Fabulous plant. There's citrus that they keep alive for 100 years in pots. And the way that they do that is they pull them out and they cut the roots. They trim the roots and then they put fresh soil and they drop them back in the pot. So you can keep a tree or a plant in a pot indefinitely if you're willing to go through that. Yes, ma'am.
But 2, can I put a plant on top of the bulbs for the sun?
That's a great question. Bulbs, yes. Her question is, she has bulbs, daffodils and tulips in pots. Does she have to take them out and for the winter, and can she plant on top of them? No and yes. So there. Next question. No. Some of them do want to be taken out and put into sawdust and put in your refrigerator. If it's that much work, I'm not going to plant it. I'm sorry, that's just caladiums. I'm not going to do it. But up here, the typically the stuff that you're going to buy for those, so they're northern based plants. They don't do real well in the a cold summer, we'll call it, climate. Up here, it's going completely dormant. They'll actually, if they leave them in the ground, that's when they split. So you want to keep them in the ground so that they'll multiply. Your tulips and your daffodils, dahlia, I have great success with dahlia or dahlia, however you want to pronounce it. You want to plant them deep. That's the secret to those. Not only for them to live through the winter. Again, if the pot is big enough and the core doesn't get cold, then they'll make it and you don't have to trade them out. If you have them in your garden, I use them frequently to line not just my herb and tomato beds and stuff like that. I have daffodils and tulips in there and dahlia. So the color will attract the birds and stuff, the bees and stuff like that. But they'll split and they're deep enough. If you want to plant them 6 to 8 inches in the ground, and that's sometimes difficult up here. So a pot works well, but they'll come up. I have them, they'll come up and bloom while your salvia is putting his leaves on. So yeah, you can plant on top of them. So that my tulips would come up and my dahlia are a summer bloomer. So they're going to bloom when this guy's blooming, which is terrific. If you get the ones with too big of a head, you're going to have to stake it. But if you plant them properly, then oftentimes that the dirt will support the flower. The other thing that I use is I'll come in here early and I will buy the red-leafed beet and I'll plant that in the beds that have my perennials. So that is coming up. I got this red foliage with my oreganos and stuff like that. It looks really pretty. And then my salvias come out and they start to bloom and it's time to eat my beets. So it's you can think about it, get a plan. Yes, sir. Irises, what do I do for them? Well, the irises are a different bird. They actually don't want too much love. I will use the flower power, but I go dilute. So they actually do best when part of the rhizome is showing on top of the ground. The javelina, again, they don't really care for them. If they pick them up, that's one that was very salvageable. It gets drug across the yard and you can find it. I just cut off the dead leaf is all that I do. And then in the spring or in the late winter, I put the flower power is got a scoop and it's a scoop per gallon. I don't want to ever fill up a 5-gallon bucket. It's too heavy and it sloshes around on me, right? So I'll put 3 big scoops in there and I'll almost fill it. So I know I'm a little light. And then I feed the bed of irises. You want it ahead of the flowering time. You want the phosphate in the plant so that it's ready to go. If you feed your peaches in the spring, it's already got the buds on it. If you feed the phosphate to them in the fall, it's able to pick them up and store it in its branches and it's going to be ready to bloom. That's what you want to think of. You want to keep them blooming, so you feed them, but to get them to bloom first, you want it in the plant. Oh, when I think they haven't been watered. I don't put them on, I don't put them on when to water irises in general. The general care for them is I plant them in the sandy decomposed granite. I throw a little bit of mulch on top of them and I let the mulch decompose to enhance the soil. And every once in a while I'm out there, I'll hit them with some water. I don't have them on drip. They will rot easily. If they get bitten by something or a rodent tastes the root, you get pill bugs in there and they'll eat and rot the root real easily. One thing I really like for irises is diatomaceous earth. And that's almost edible. You don't want to put it on your frosted flakes, but it's just organic material that gets stuck in the joints on anything with an exoskeleton. So grasshoppers, roaches, pill bugs, all that stuff. It suffocates them because they breathe through their joints. But that's a real good one for irises. It's a great one for tomatoes also. Yes. So come again, please. Get your name on the list. You bet. I'll be here for a little bit, and we've got some other people that will, anybody in an apron ought to be able to help you. Most of the folks here are master gardener certified or are nurserymen certified or both. Thank you. Now I got to put it all away. Yeah, not unless you buy them. Oh, don't forget the lavenders are on sale, $5 off. They're all right over there. They're evergreen and they'll bloom blue, and they're $17.99. So they turn out to be $12, $13. These.
And which ones are shade? For shade.
The shade is the heuchera and the hostas. No, the purple leaf. And the hosta is the white and variegated. But there's more down there. There's 2 tables that are marked as shade. And then there's 1 table over here, annuals that love shade. The whole downstairs is perennial. This is annuals and veggies. This greenhouse, yes. Correct.